The lobby of the Meridian Hotel was quiet that afternoon, filled only with the soft clink of coffee cups and the low hum of conversation. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, falling in warm patches across the marble floor. It was the kind of ordinary day that no one remembers, until something happens that changes everything. Yekaterina Orlova sat near the window, dressed in a deep green gown, her long chestnut hair falling over her shoulders. She was one of the wealthiest women in the country, the head of a shipping empire her father had built, and she had doubled. But none of that mattered to her in this moment. What mattered was her daughter, Sophia, sitting beside her in a small pink wheelchair. Sophia was 6 years old. 3 years ago, a car accident had taken away the use of her legs. Since that day, Yekaterina had spent millions searching for doctors, therapists, specialists in every country she could reach. She had built walls of money around her daughter, hoping they would somehow keep her safe from more pain. But no amount of money had given Sophia back the ability to walk. That afternoon, they were meeting an old family friend for lunch, a quiet, ordinary lunch, nothing more. Yekaterina straightened the collar of Sophia's purple dress and smiled at her, the practiced, gentle smile of a mother who has learned to hide her worry. "Are you comfortable, my love?" she asked softly. Sophia nodded, her eyes wandering around the lobby, watching the people, the waiters, the light moving across the floor. She was a curious child, always looking for something interesting in the world around her, even from her chair. Across the lobby, a man knelt down near the entrance, tying the shoelace of his sneaker. His name was Nikolai Volkov. He wore a simple blue shirt and worn jeans, nothing like the polished suits of the businessmen seated nearby. He looked like an ordinary man, tired, quiet, carrying something heavy behind his calm eyes. Nikolai had once been someone else. Years ago, he had worked as a combat medic, serving in places most people only heard about on the news. He had seen things there that changed him forever. Things he never spoke about, not even to the people closest to him. When he came home, he did not return to medicine. He said the hospitals reminded him too much of the field tents, where he had lost patients he could not save. Instead, he became a carpenter, working with his hands, building furniture, fixing what was broken. It was simple work, and it kept his mind quiet. He was raising his son alone, a boy of 8 named Andrei ever since his wife had passed away 2 years earlier. Life had not been easy, but Nikolai had built a small, steady world for the two of them, one day at a time. He had come to the hotel that day, only to drop off a chair he had repaired for the manager, an old favor between friends. He had no reason to be there beyond that. He was simply finishing his task, about to leave, when something happened that no one inches the lobby expected. Sophia's eyes landed on Nikolai. For a moment, she went very still, staring at him the way children stare when they recognize something deep inside themselves. Something words cannot explain. Her small hands gripped the arms of her wheelchair. Then, slowly, she began to move her legs. At first, it looked like nothing, a small twitch, an accident of the body. But then her knees bent, her feet pressed against the footrest, and before anyone could stop her, before her mother could even register what was happening, Sophia pushed herself up and stood. She took one step, then another. "Papa," she cried out, her voice bright and full of joy, cutting through the quiet lobby like a bell. "Papa, it's you." She ran. Her small legs that had not carried her in 3 years, moved across the marble floor toward the kneeling man. Around her, the lobby froze. A waiter dropped his notepad. A woman at a nearby table gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Even the chef, who had stepped out from the kitchen to check on an order, stopped in the doorway, stunned. Yekaterina rose from her seat so fast. Her chair nearly toppled behind her. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She opened her mouth to call her daughter's name, but no sound came out. She simply stood there, frozen, her hand pressed to her chest, watching her daughter run for the first time in 3 years toward a stranger she had never seen before. Nikolai turned at the sound of the child's voice. His eyes widened as the little girl threw herself into his arms. He caught her instinctively, the way anyone would catch a child who was falling toward them. But his face was full of confusion. He had never seen this girl before in his life. "Sweetheart," he said gently, kneeling lower so he was at her eye level. "I think you might have me confused with someone else." Sophia pulled back and looked at him closely. Her joyful smile faded slowly into a puzzled frown. She studied his face, his eyes, the small scar above his eyebrow. Then her shoulders dropped, and her lower lip began to tremble. "You're not my papa," she whispered. "No," Nikolai said softly, his voice full of kindness. "I'm sorry, I'm not. But it's all right. You are safe." By now, Yekaterina had crossed the lobby, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble. She dropped to her knees beside her daughter, tears streaming freely down her face, disbelief and relief mixing together in a way she could not put into words. "Sophia," she breathed, pulling her daughter close, feeling the small legs that were now, somehow, standing on their own. You're standing, my love." Sophia buried her face in her mother's shoulder, suddenly shy, suddenly aware of all the eyes watching her. "I thought he was Papa," she said quietly. "He looked just like him, from the pictures." Yekaterina's breath caught. Sophia's father had died 3 years earlier, in the same accident that had taken away her ability to walk. She rarely spoke of him, not wanting to open old wounds, but apparently, somewhere in her small heart, she had been carrying his memory all this time, waiting for a moment to bring him back, even if only in her imagination. Nikolai stood slowly, unsure of what to do, feeling like an outsider in a moment that clearly belonged to this small family. He glanced around at the stunned crowd, and for a moment, he considered simply walking away, letting the mother and daughter have their privacy. But then Yekaterina looked up at him, still holding Sophia close, her eyes red but grateful. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what just happened, but thank you for catching her." "She caught herself," Nikolai said gently. "I only happened to be there." Doctors would later say that Sophia's paralysis had likely been more emotional than physical for some time, a condition the mind sometimes creates to protect itself from unbearable grief. Seeing a man who resembled her father so closely may have triggered something deep within her, a memory, a hope, a need so strong that her body responded before her mind could stop it. It was not magic. It was the quiet, mysterious power of love and memory, working in ways no doctor could fully explain. In the weeks that followed, Yekaterina found herself returning to that hotel more than once, not out of coincidence, but because she wanted to understand what had happened, and perhaps, if she was honest with herself, because she wanted to see the kind stranger again. She learned about Nikolai's past slowly, in small pieces, the way people learn to trust each other over time. She learned about the son he was raising alone, about the years he had spent healing soldiers on distant battlefields, about the quiet life he had built afterward, far from the noise of his old world. Sophia, for her part, adjusted quickly, though her legs did not always cooperate perfectly. She began walking with help, then with a cane, and eventually, most days, on her own. She often asked to visit the nice man from the hotel, and slowly, without either adult planning it, their lives began to weave together. Nikolai's son, Andrei, and Sophia became fast friends, running through the same lobby where they first met, laughing instead of gasping this time. And Yekaterina, a woman who had spent years building walls of money and power around her small family, found herself drawn to a man who had nothing to offer but his time, his patience, and his quiet strength. One evening, many months later, the four of them sat together in a small garden behind Nikolai's workshop, the smell of fresh wood and evening air mixing gently around them. Sophia ran across the grass, her legs steady now, chasing Andrei in a game only children understand. Yekaterina watched her daughter, with a peace she had not felt in years. "You gave her back something I couldn't buy," she said quietly to Nikolai, who sat beside her, watching the same scene. He shook his head slowly. "She gave it back to herself. I just happened to look like someone she needed to see." Yekaterina smiled, watching the last light of the sun settle over the garden. "Maybe," she said. "But I think some meetings are not accidents at all. And as the children's laughter echoed through the evening air, both of them understood, without needing to say it aloud, that sometimes the smallest, most unexpected moments carry the power to heal what years of money, grief, and silence never could.